Welcome to Medieval Dynasty, an open-world, realistic medieval life survival and town builder simulator. In Medieval Dynasty, we will hunt, survive, build, and lead in the harsh Middle Ages, creating our own medieval dynasty to ensure its long-lasting prosperity. Or die trying. Here we have Rasimir, an 18-year-old hard-working farm boy who had it all, until his village was pillaged in the heat of war. Fleeing from his old life, he seeks his uncle Eordan to start anew in this peaceful, secluded valley. We now find ourselves in the valley on the outskirts of Gistovia. Clearly the first logical step to take in this new land was to pick up every single stick and rock in sight. Surely this would gain the favor of our uncle Eordan, or so I thought. I walked into town so I could speak with the castellan of the valley, Unigast, a good-looking man of 50 years. Only I could hope to age as well as this man. It was at this point he gave me the bad news. Eordan was dead. In fact, he died 3 years ago. You would think the news would have reached my mother or father in that span of time, but this is the medieval ages we're talking about. Anyways, I digress. Unigast, feeling pity on the fact that I'd lost my home and family, gave me permission to build anything anywhere in the entire valley, providing I pay the yearly tax to the king and not break any laws in the valley. And with that, I was off. I crafted myself an axe from the pile of sticks and rocks I'd accumulated throughout my journey to Gistovia, and set off to the west to build myself a simple but quaint small house. On my way down the road, I noticed a bird walking across the road.
Enemy spotted.
My primal instincts kicked in as I slowly snuck up behind the oblivious thing and clubbed it with my stone axe. I almost felt sorry for the crow. I made a stone knife and took any meat and feathers I could find off the creature. A successful first hunt. Eventually, I made it to the location where I could start my town, New Gistovia. And after harvesting a few logs and reeds, I'd built a house to call my own. This one-room, thatched roof cottage had a lot to offer, but the day was still young and it was time to go back on the hunt. I set up a small trap outside for any rabbits bold enough to take the bait, crafted a spear, and went out into the wilds to find some game. I found a wandering doe and took my chances. Sneaking up on the creature, I continuously threw my one spear at her until she went down. A resounding success. While basking in my victory, I was ambushed by a wild boar.
Why are you running?
My spear broke, so I had no feasible means to protect myself. So I decided to lose him and skin my doe before anything else could happen. Funnily enough, I ran into the same boar on the way home after making new spears, and speared him right between the eyes. After I arrived home, my rabbit trap was also triggered. Rasimir would feast tonight, that was certain. But as I cooked my doe, boar, rabbit, and oblivious crow meat, I was quite gloomy that I had no one to share this feast with. After eating and losing my spears in the lake for no good reason at all, I walked to Gistovia and met the love of my life, Edburga. It was love at first sight. I knew it would take some time before Edburga would be interested, so I bided my time with small talk. Finally, after delivering some ale to Unigast, I decided it was late and I would get some rest and see what else waited me in the morning. In the morning, I returned to Unigast, who insisted I meet an old friend of his by the name of Sambor. I also met a young lad by the name of Alwyn, who asked me to give a stick to a kid for some reason, but instead of doing that, I decided to make the trek to Sambor, a grisly-looking type, whom I dug up some clay deposits for. After returning the clay, Sambor told me stories of my uncle Eordan and how he once slept with the king's wife to get back at a lord. A true hero, which led him to become a Robin Hood of sorts. I parted with Sambor, killed a wolf that was stalking me on the road, and returned to Unigast to have him send me on another mission to retrieve his scythe from a woman who he lost to in a game of riddles. She offered to give it to me if I successfully answered the riddle. I was not successful, so I would have to pay the hefty price of 450 coins to return it. Unfortunately, I had no money. So that night I worked in New Gistovia, completing a woodcutter and a workshop before bed. The next day, I schmoozed around town, talking to Edburga and a few other villagers, bought the scythe, and returned it to Unigast before heading back to Sambor. It appeared the old man had an owl problem, which ended up not being an owl, but a man in a bush. I was ready to put him down, but he ran off with his tail between his legs, not before finding out who sent him. Wolrad. Sambor somehow found this amusing and asked me to come back tomorrow. Upon arrival in the morning, he said he had a nice warm package he said to get to Wolrad in haste. I, unsuspecting of anything that was going on, happily walked across the map, Turns out what I was delivering was a pile of shit. Thanks, Sambor. Wolrad then asked me to kill his cow. What's wrong with these people? Anyway, I killed his cow and challenged a villager to a hunting competition before heading home and building a hunting lodge. New Gustovia was really turning into a nice hamlet at this point. The next morning, I flirted around with Edburga, bought some seeds for the upcoming farm, and woke Alwyn up to ask him if he needed any help. Turns out his water skin was leaking, so I took the task myself to go fix it. But first I would need to start my own farm. I made some space behind the house, fertilizing and plowing the land before planting a few cabbages. Hopefully by the next season, these would be ready to be harvested. Before heading off to the seamstress Matilda to fix Alwyn's water skin, I built a well so I no longer had to drink the water I also bathed myself in. Matilda said she could fix Alwyn's water skin, but would need some materials for it. Being the successful hunter I was, I went out to retrieve some deer hide. A simple task. As the sun set, I arrived back in Gustovia with Alwyn's fixed water skin, and talked to Unigast about an old fling he had with a woman named Kestrel. Apparently him and Uncle Eordan had loved the same woman, but Unigast kept his affair with Kestrel a secret. Eventually, Eordan and Unigast split ways with Kestrel after she birthed a stillborn child, not knowing which one of them was the father. Unigast said Sambor may know where she resides, so I'll need to talk to him about that. Now we find ourselves in the first day of fall. Most of my cabbages were successful, so I harvested my crops and had plenty of food for the coming seasons. After some maintenance on my hamlet, it was time to see Edburga. She was sitting at the communal fire with all the other singles in Gustovia. Our love was firm and shatterproof, so I thought it was time to pop the question. And she said yes, and thus, Rasimir and Edburga got married. This also means I now had my first villager living with me in New Gustovia, which would provide me an extra sticks and logs without deforesting the entire area. Perfect timing because I was in need of some extra building materials. For the rest of the night and into the next day, I built a smithy, a sewing hut, an herbalist hut, a kitchen, and many new houses for the future inhabitants. New Gustovia was looking like a real town at this point, be it slightly vacant. But I was no longer alone now that I had Edburga. I left her to hold the fort down while I hunted some bigger game than I was usually used to. No longer was I throwing spears at birds and hogs. I had a bow and stone arrows. The first thing I hunted was a moose. The moose probably could have killed me in a second if it tried. Another hog tried to ambush me while I was hunting the elk, but to no avail. I found my moose and went for the kill shot. Next on the list was the Wysent, or the bison as I knew it better. Unfortunately for me, this one was not going down without a fight. I was instantly taken down my first try. It seemed to me that it was going to take more than range to take this hulk of a beast down, and it didn't help me that I was low in health for the fact that unbeknownst to me, I was dying of thirst. I should have gone home to regain my health after realizing this, but I was determined. With the help of my intelligent monkey brain, I tried to make a fence preventing the bison from catching me. It almost worked, but the clever bison simply went around the fence and killed me anyways. Then I tried making a fence, encasing myself in, and shooting him from the inside. This almost worked, but the fence was too small and the bison could simply hit me from the outside. But I now knew the fence was a great weakness to the creature. Finally, after making a bigger fence where it would not be able to reach me, I made my final stand. The bull began to run as it realized it would not be able to penetrate my fence made of loose sticks and branches, and bled out along the way. A cheesy success, but a success nonetheless. Finally, it was time to hunt a bear. I had not seen a bear as of yet, so I was ready for an even greater battle with the creature. I went home to catch my breath and heal some, before heading back out in the morning to hunt the bear. I waved goodbye to Edburga, not knowing if I would see her again, and went out into the mountains to find my bear. Finally, I set my eyes on the creature near some mountains, and began pelting the creature with arrows from the top of one. Luck was with me on this day as the bear couldn't scale the mountain, so I made quick work of it. I scaled down the mountain to skin the bear, and I noticed I was standing next to a cave. Worried that there might be bears inside, I warily made my way in. Thankfully there were no bears, but lots of copper, tin, and salt. I spent a good amount of time in here breaking multitudes of pickaxes to remove any resources I could find, before taking the scenic route home. I found some good resources from a broken down cart, along with a bronze pickaxe near a waterfall. I'm sure this will be useful the next time I go out mining. I made my way down the river, and while I was hunting a duck, I began to be attacked from behind. I was locked into skinning my subjects, so I fled across the river before seeing what beast was attacking me. And it wasn't a beast at all. They were bandits. This was my first encounter with aggressive people, so I used my range to my advantage and began picking off the bandits with my bow. I took their loot along with some apples and searched for wherever they came from. My health was low, so I picked up a few plantains I found on the ground to hold me over, then came upon their camp. There was another bandit left who had a bow, so I took cover behind a tree. It was a battle of skill at this point, and not before long, the bandit archer went down. They had a nice little campfire going, so I sat down and took in the scenery for a moment, before looting the surrounding areas and heading home to get ready for the winter. And winter came quick, as I began to freeze almost as soon as I left my house. I may have had winter clothes at some point, but I may have sold them for money before realizing I needed them. I planned to make a trip to Matilda to order some new clothes, but my wife had a quest for me. There was an inventor in Brannica that she insisted I meet with, so I accepted before heading to the town of Matilda's to acquire some new clothes. Thankfully, I had a torch on me to keep me warm along the way, else I may have frozen before I made it to her hometown of Denica. Matilda had an abundance of new clothes, so after spending a hefty fee of 1,900 coins, I was dripped out in the finest furs one could have in the valley. Another thing I forgot to mention was that there was a storm that came in on the last night of fall, damaging almost half of my buildings. Luckily, Edburga was hard at work getting resources while I was hunting last season, so I spent the rest of the day fixing all the damaged buildings, before heading to Brannica in the morning to meet this so-called inventor, a young woman by the name of Nicola, who sent me on a wild goose chase, hunting the birds of the valley to create the ultimate arrow. My aim was terrible, so it took me the entire day before completing her task. After I returned, I found some nice ladies to move into New Gustovia, Kazimiera and Niestanka. They were excellent excavators, which seemed like good jobs to start with, making Kazi our blacksmith and Niestanka our water carrier. I also acquired a man by the name of Harald from Gustovia to be a hunter for the village. Now I would have someone who could passively obtain meat, leather, and feathers for me while I was off doing my business. I returned again to Nicola to see how her arrow research was going. Turns out none of the feathers I brought to her were better than the good old goose feathers. It was not all for nothing though, because I offered her a place to live in the new settlement, and I'm glad I did, because her stats are busted. Nicola was exactly what I needed, so I had her take Edburga's place in the woodshed, and now had Edburga working as a hunter with Harald. The village was now at a good 7 inhabitants, each with their own homes to keep them happy. I also created some torches because the town felt a bit dark at night. As winter in my first year in the valley came to a close, I felt like a lot of progress was made in town. The village was occupied and farming resources for me, making my job a lot easier. Spring was here now, and it was time for taxes. I asked Edburga to take the tax money Unigost, while I surveyed the town. Some of the townspeople had quests of their own, simple things like making wooden spears for Harald, and acquiring berries for Niestanka. After helping them, I thought it was time to visit my friends in Gustovia. It had been a while since I had seen Alwyn, and he was looking rather sad. In fact, he couldn't even look at me. He broke his hoe, and was able to get it fixed on the fact that he had so much work to do. So I offered to pick it up for him while he worked. It was a quick trip to the village across the river, picking up Alwyn's hoe and returning it to him. Alwyn, still devastated about his broken hoe, had not moved an inch since I left him, but hopefully now he could pull himself together and get some work done. The man that fixed Alwyn's hoe, named Falibor, also mentioned that a hunter was looking for buyers for his bows. I didn't need one myself, but I let Alwyn know, who seemed interested in the idea of having one. After taking care of Alwyn, Unigost's wife, Dobraniega, asked me to see what was going on with a rye delivery she was supposed to receive. A quick chat with her friend informed me that the rye was diseased and unusable. She apparently had some ordered from the far-off town of Ralnica that was supposed to arrive yesterday, so I decided to check with the deliverer Nadar. Nadar informed me that his worker never returned from the delivery, so something must have gone very wrong. I searched for his delivery man and found Hugo near a stream, who was seriously injured from an attack. I told Nadar to send help to his man as soon as possible. Hopefully Hugo would make it back alive. But I did get my rye, and I was a bit tired from running back and forth, so I decided to take the wagoner back to Gustovia and deliver the rye to Dobraniega. Finally, we had to go check on Sambor. I was curious about where this Kestrel woman may be, so I went to see what was up with him. Sambor didn't seem thrilled to see me again, and wouldn't give me the location of Kestrel without picking him up a multitude of vegetables. You are indeed a bastard, Sambor. I hope you know that. And so it was back to Gistovia to go grocery shopping. Luckily, a vendor had all the vegetables I needed, and I had the coin for it. So after buying the food, I went back to Sambor to get my answer. Kestrel was in Hornica. Major spoilers regarding the end of Alwyn, Sambor, and Unigos stories are ahead, so if that's something you would like to avoid, make sure to drop that king's tax of 1 like and 1 sub. But you've been warned, so let's continue our story. Right now, we find ourselves in the middle of New Gistovia. Our village is now inhabited with some good workers, but we still need more villagers to join our ranks. I took some time to build some new houses for said villagers before heading off to Baranica to invite Frida to the village, taking her place as our second lumberjack. With the second lumberjack, I will now have ways to support all my future wagoning trips by selling everyone in the valley my finest wooden vials. I also picked up a potion from the herbalist that I would soon need, more on that later. Then it was off to Hornica, where we would finally be able to meet Sambor and Unigos' old friend Kestrel. Hornica was a bit of a ways away, so I decided to take the Wagner there. A decent amount of the villagers here had skills I was looking for, so I was able to invite Godfried and Wiltruda to move into New Gistovia, making them barn workers for the time being. After setting them up with their own houses and jobs, I searched the town for Kestrel. I was not expecting to find her in such an unsightly manner. She was on the floor, babbling nonsense and completely drunk. This is where the potion early comes in handy. Now would be a good time to mention that I had some recording issues early on, and had gotten this far only to find out my video quality was ruined. So I had to redo this part over again. So to save time, I figured I could pick up the potion early and save myself the trip. So yeah, my bad. But Kestrel was sober now, and I could finally hear what she had to say about her adventures with Unigos and my uncle. 12 years back, their band found this valley where we live in today, and that their endgame was to settle down here, but they had to complete one final mission: steal back stolen loot from a town hall treasury. After the heist, Eordan went missing, so Kestrel went out looking for him. She found him standing over the dead body of their informant, and Eordan was angry that Kestrel wasn't waiting for him at the horses. It wasn't like Eordan to kill someone, let alone not be fazed by it. Kestrel told the band what had happened when he returned. Eordan broke the trust of the pack and was caught in lie after lie. By the next dawn, Wolrad left, and then Sambor, which led the pack to disbanding altogether. When I asked her about her affair with Unigos, she said she believed Eordan knew the entire time, and simply didn't care, only wanting the pack to be happy. She also relayed that she knew the child wasn't his either, and it was Unigos, but refused to let either of them know. And if that wasn't enough of a bombshell, she dropped another one on me, telling me that she believed that Eordan didn't succumb to old age, but he was in fact murdered, with his body being burned the same day. I asked for any leads, and she gave me the location of the medic who burned his body, which wasn't far out from town, so I went there. I met this medic, Dieter, who seemed super suspicious about the entire situation, urging me to drop the topic, being afraid for his life. I offered him a ticket out of the valley if he gave me any answers to the cause of his death or possible suspects. He asked for a horse, an escort, and some supplies to prepare for his departure. So I filled Kestrel in on some demands, not before stealing everything the medic had, because for some reason it wasn't considered stealing. Kestrel told me she would take care of the horse, but that would need to get some coin, meat, water skin, and the escort. A man by the name of Domagoj. Domagoj? Domagoj? Domagoj. I figured I could make it to his place before the end of the season, so I made my way to Jazerica before sundown. Domagoj said he could take him, but not without getting his crossbow back, which he lost in a game of riddles. I swear, this riddle lady is finessing everyone in this entire valley. It wasn't worth it to me to walk all the way back home this night, so I found a nice view on top of the mountain to wait for the new season. After being magically teleported home, I set my traps and visited Alwyn. He wanted me to help him find the hunter who sold bows, so together we went across the river to ask Falamor where the hunter was. Gisela lived in Lesnica, so we headed off to Lesnica, after making one small trip to New Gistovia. I set more of my traps and noticed Edburga had a quest for me. She wanted to have a special evening together, and asked for me to pick up some wine that she ordered. I guess this was as good a time as ever, because it was about time I had an heir. You hear that, Alwyn? I'm getting laid tonight. But first, Lesnica. We met up with Gisela, the bad-tempered huntress, and picked up a longbow for Alwyn. Now that Alwyn was set for the season, I took the wagoner back to Gestovia and picked up the wine my wife had ordered. Our night of passionate activities was put on a halt, however, because some lady in Branica was being ousted. So after building a chicken coop, I found Georgiana and Branica. Not to be confused with Bo Ranica right next door. It would have been less confusing if they named it something like New Branica, but that's not important. Supposedly, she was scammed into believing that she bought the land in Branica. Knowing that's not how the law worked in the valley, I offered her a place to live in New Gestovia. Another good villager with some nice stats. I'll likely have her work in the new chicken coop I built. Edburga was satisfied, so needless to say, we were both satisfied. The next morning, I built Georgiana a house and bought some chickens for the hen house. Alwyn wanted to build an archery range, so I helped him do so before showing my pro archery skills. Well, third time's a charm. Next season, we were back with Alwyn, but this time he bet 100 coins I couldn't beat his score in 3 shots. It was child's play, as my archery skills were too good for the farm boy. Before the next season, I took some time to build a fishing hut, but probably wouldn't get much use out of it for now. I still hadn't learned how to fish aside from a few fishing traps I laid down, which also seemed expensive because it would cost me linen thread over time. I also created a pigsty and picked up a few pigs, which would passively produce me manure, saving me from having to spend coin on fertilizer from now on. Next season, Alwyn had a new competition in mind: kill a bear in 8 hours time. Luckily, I knew where a bear spawned that was not too far from here, so I went back to the mountains, claimed my bear, and went mining since I was here already. When I returned to Alwyn, he admitted I was the better hunter and told me he was giving up the archery life, giving up his bow to me. I was not pleased with this outcome, but I held onto his bow in case things changed in the future. The next morning, Edburga came to me saying it was an emergency and that her belly wasn't feeling well, telling me to find the nearest herbalist quick. Naturally, I went to Norbert to see what he thought about it, and told me she was fine, but to be safe, would come with me and check in on her. I filled a water skin and made it back to Edburga, only for her to tell me it was simply indigestion. Better safe than sorry, I guess? I wasn't doing much this winter aside from village maintenance and spamming wooden vials to support my Wagner trips anyway. This Wagner was getting rich off of me, I could tell you that. Randomly, I went to visit Sambor to see if there was anything new going on. There wasn't, but I found these nice little wooden figurines laying around the clay deposits. I asked Sambor about them, who seemed embarrassed until I told him how nice they were. He told me he had tried making a living on these figurines, but the businesswoman of the valley that deals with artwork and ornaments was cutthroat, and hard to sell them off to. I told him I could try my hand at selling them to her, which was fine by him. I took the wagoner to Denica to meet this businesswoman, Fenina. Fenina was much younger than I was expected for a prominent businesswoman, and her being cutthroat was an understatement. She was ruthless. She said she would buy the figurines though, if I helped get a special item for a buyer she had. I went to my favorite medicine man Norbert, whom I bought the elixir of cosmic might from. Turns out that name was just fancy for a potion of potency. Oh. Anyways, I got the ingredients I had for the liquid Viagra made before returning to Fenina. I gave her the instructions on how her client needed to use it before returning back tomorrow. But before that time could come, my son was officially born. I wanted to name him Rasmir Jr., but that wasn't in the options, so Radagast would have to do. My dynasty was officially complete, but there were still lots to do in the valley. Upon returning to Fenina, she told me her client was furious that the potion didn't work at all. At this point, client privacy went out the window, and she told me to talk to the man myself. So I was off to Bogdan of Branica to find out what was going on. He was very angry, accusing me of attempting to mutilate him. I asked him if he drank the potion 3 times a day, and at this point he informed me that he had made a tremendous mistake. This was going to be hard to explain to Fenina, but Bogdan sincerely apologized and gave me payment. It was back to Denica to bring payment to Fenina. She was satisfied, so she told me she was willing to buy the figurines for 1 gold apiece. I've been bamboozled by this child. I should have expected this much at this point. She also mentioned that she was leaving the valley, concluding that there was some serious business to conduct elsewhere. Not if I can help it. I tried everything, but it was no use. I returned to Sambor and told her that she bought the figurines. At this point, he asked me how much I made, and I couldn't bear to tell him the truth. I gave him 1,000 coins, bought a couple for myself, and let him bask in his newly found wealth. I was going to have to make extra wooden vials for this season, that was almost certain. I checked on Alwyn and he was back to his old sad self. I could see him disassociating as I spoke with him. Something had to be done. His dreams were crushed over a silly little competition. I had to go back to the Huntress and see if anything could be done for him. I pretty much begged her to make him her new apprentice. She said she may have an opportunity for him, but that he would have to bring her something special to prove he's worthy. I journeyed back to Alwyn, who still hadn't moved an inch since I saw him last. I hate to see the guy like this, but I told him the Huntress had plans for the young Alwyn. I was still holding on to his bow, but that didn't seem like it would be good enough. I had to find a better bow for the lad. So I bought a nice recurve bow from Gisela to give to Alwyn. I handed him the bow so he could have a better chance at hunting the local Wysent. I gave him a few more tips as well before I said goodbye. I would hope that one day I would hear from the great hunter Alwyn. But for now, it was time to let the guy go. He gave me his iron hoe and iron scythe and left Gistovia to become the hunter he was truly meant to be. Farewell, Alwyn. Farewell. Alright, returning back to Kestrel's quest. It was time to meet this riddle lady for the second time now, and she offered pity on me. Instead of a riddle, I needed to find her fresh fish. A part of me wished it was a second riddle, but fish it is. I didn't have a fishing hut or know how to fish, so I traveled around the valley buying up any fish I could find. It didn't take too long to find, so I traded the fish for the crossbow, dropped the crossbow off to Domagoy, and made my way back to Kestrel to deliver all the supplies. Now that we had everything we needed, we could finally get our answers from the old medic, and this is what he had to say. He said he was awakened in the middle of the night due to an accident, and that someone was in need of his attention. He was taken to the Castellan's house and found out something happened to him. When he went inside, he found Jordan. At this point, it was clear it was no accident. Jordan's throat was cut, and the medic found himself cornered. The cloaked figure that brought him there told him to burn the body as soon as it stopped raining, so that people would presume it was a disease. They moved the body, cleaned the blood, and burned the sheets along with him. After a few weeks, the medic left Gistovia in fear of his life, because the same man that killed Jordan was now the new Castellan of the valley. Unigost. Honestly, after Kestrel said she believed he was murdered, I thought it may have been Sambor, the former torturer, or even Wolrad, but Unigost and Jordan were best friends. It wasn't so believable to me that he would kill him out of jealousy or power. I needed to talk to him. And when confronted about Jordan's death, there was little fight in him. He admitted to killing Jordan. He said it wasn't because of what he did to Kestrel, because they all played a role in that love triangle. It wasn't about vengeance or jealousy of wanting to become Castellan either. It was his corruption. Unigost was the only one to stay near Jordan after the pact disbanded. Jordan's ambitions led him to meet with the king alone, and came back with the title of Castellan of the Valley, and began to act as a true leader. But Unigost knew what he was hiding from them. Being afraid of Unigost seeing the shift in his moral compass, they grew distant, which is when the worst came out of Jordan. He became the very thing he and the pack fought against. A corrupted lord, whoring around, taking advantage of the poor, making money off of wars, and befriending thugs to gain their favor. Unigost said this brought him immense guilt, and knew he had to be the one to stop it. So he snuck into his house during a heavy rain, and killed him with one clean slice to the throat. After hearing the stories from Kestrel, Sambor, and Unigost about Uncle Jordan, it was clear to me that he was not a flawless soul. At the start of their journeys together, he and the pack had the right intentions, but there was always something Jordan was hiding from them, and his ambition caused him to become jaded and corrupted by the world, becoming what he and his friends swore to fight against. Jordan was a murderer and was willing to murder for less. So a part of me felt more compassion towards Unigost in his story, even though his actions were not excusable. Unigost was an honest man in the end, and was not going to fight against whatever fate I chose for him. I could have had him killed if I so decided, but I couldn't do it. Although Jordan was my uncle, I never really met the guy, and Unigost had done so much to help me in the time I had spent in the valley so far, so I gave him the lightest punishment. I had him exiled from the valley. A part of me hoped I could just allow him to stay, and just take his titles away from him. But exiled was a better fate than death. So it was time to say farewell to Unigast. The valley was feeling especially gloomy lately, now with Alwyn and Unigast gone from the valley, but I could always visit Sambor if I was feeling lonely. On top of that, I had Edburga and Radagast to take care of, along with a dozen other inhabitants of New Gustovia. Our journey in the first chapter to the valley had come to an end, and it was time to expand our town even further, starting with obtaining my first mount. I wish I got this donkey earlier. It would have saved me a lot of coin from traveling from place to place. But this concludes our series of Medieval Dynasty. And let me know on any games you would like to see in future as intended videos or tutorials in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.